Career and Family: Women's Century-Long Journey Toward Equity. By Claudia Golden, Nancy Crane, et al. The author of this book, Claudia Golden, was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2023. She is the Charles F. Spalding Professor of Economics at Harvard University and the first woman to receive tenure in the Harvard Department of Economics. Her primary research areas include female labor force participation and gender inequality. As of 2023, the Nobel Prize in Economics has been awarded 55 times to 93 individuals. Claudia Golden is one of only 3 female economists to have received this honor and the only laureate in female economics. The book we're discussing today, Career or Family, showcases many of Golden's research findings. It is not a highly theoretical or abstract book. When reading it, you'll feel like watching a documentary spanning over a century. In these real-life stories, you'll see larger-than-life figures and vivid faces. Within the lines and waves of the charts, you'll observe the changes in a collective portrait of women. The camera zooms in and out, with women from different eras passing before you, narrating their lives, choices, breakthroughs, and struggles. In this book, Claudia Golden focuses on 2 main questions. First, she explores how educated American women have balanced their careers and families over the past 100 years. They've made what efforts and choices? Second, she delves into the formation of gender income inequality in modern-day America and how it can be improved. Let's start with the first one: how have American women balanced their careers and families over the past century? Claudia Golden undertook an unprecedented research effort by examining a large dataset of women born between 1878 and 1978 who received a college education. She divided them into 5 groups with approximately 20-year periods. She conducted in-depth studies on their aspirations, their challenges in terms of career, marriage, and having children, and the choices they ultimately made. What's surprising is that there's a stark contrast in women's life trajectories across these 5 groups, but within each group, their choices exhibit remarkable consistency. Why is this the case? Let's start by looking at the first group of educated women. Most were born in the late 19th century and graduated from college between 1900 and 1920. The data presented in the book about this group of women might surprise many. We assume that earlier generations had more traditional views on marriage, with higher marriage and childbirth rates, and at a younger age. However, these women had the lowest marriage and childbirth rates among the 5 groups. Half of them never had children, and nearly 1/3 remained unmarried. Even among those who did marry, many did so later. So why was this the case? The main reason is that at that time, very few people, especially women, could attend college, only about 3%. When a woman decided to pursue higher education, she often had to sacrifice family life in favor of a career. Balancing both career and family was not something they dared to consider. The author shared an anecdote about her time as a graduate student at the University of Chicago in 1971. She frequently saw a distinguished, elderly lady carrying a large rectangular box filled with punch cards containing computer code. This woman was Professor Margaret Reed, a 75-year-old economics professor at the University of Chicago who had retired a decade earlier but continued her research. She was an early scholar who applied economics to marriage, divorce, and family issues. Professor Reed represents a typical image of the first group of educated women. These women aimed to succeed in their careers, but often remained unmarried and childless. The reason wasn't necessarily a stronger career orientation among these women. This outcome was influenced more by external factors, such as marriage restrictions. During the early 20th century, the government and companies in the United States often imposed marriage restrictions, preventing married women from holding specific jobs, such as teaching or clerical work. Even for women who were not restricted by marriage, juggling family and work was challenging, as the modern household appliances we have today didn't exist. Women had heavy household burdens. Many women of that era felt compelled to choose between family and career, primarily because they lacked the tools and support to manage both. the situation began to change significantly during the mid-20th century when the third group of women, born between 1924 and 1943, graduated from college. More than 90% of them got married, often at a young age, and most had children. The median age for marriage was around 23. They benefited from the post-World War II era, a time of relative peace, economic recovery, and relaxation of marriage restrictions for women. The baby boom era in the United States, roughly from 1946 to 1964, overlaps with this third group of women's college graduates, making a significant difference in family planning dynamics. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, the United States had a vibrant women's liberation movement. This movement, led by various women's organizations, advocated for women's freedom and rights. It motivated many women to become more career-oriented. The fourth group of educated women, born between 1944 and 1957, who graduated from college in the mid-1960s to the late 1970s, observed their mothers staying at home for extended periods, often leading to skill atrophy or career interruptions. They were determined not to follow the same path as their mothers. They aimed to follow their dreams and achieve self-fulfillment. These women began to show a trend previously unseen, an ambition to enter fields such as law, medicine, finance, and management, the highest-paying and most prestigious careers at that time. They wanted to excel in their professions. Many pursued graduate degrees, such as master's and doctoral degrees. The author, born in 1946, belongs to this fourth group of women, and her personal experience aligns with the experiences of many women of her generation. However, postponing childbirth was not without its consequences. As time passed, many women discovered they had forgotten to have children. Data shows that more than 28% of these educated women in their 30s were childless during the peak years of childlessness for the fourth group. The fifth group, born between 1958 and 1978, continued the trend of marrying later, with a median age of marriage around 27. However, they increased their childbearing rates. At the peak of childlessness for these women, in their 40s, about 20% were still childless, and that figure dropped to 17% at the end of this group's timeframe. It was partly due to these women learning from the experiences of previous generations and the availability of more advanced reproductive technologies, as well as improved family-friendly workplace policies. So, over the past century, educated women experienced a transition from choosing between career and family to sequentially establishing their job and family and finding ways to balance both effectively. This journey reflects a gradual improvement in their conditions. The author believes that there are reasons to be optimistic about the future. Now, let's move on to the second part of the discussion, which focuses on another major issue explored in the book, the gender income gap. The author's research shows that despite women's increasing ability to balance career and family over the past 120 years, their income levels still significantly lag behind men's. On average, female college graduates in the fourth and fifth groups earn 27% less than their male counterparts of the same age. So, what causes this difference? The term gender income gap is often associated with gender discrimination. For instance, in recent years, there was a well-known case of gender pay discrimination involving American actress Michelle Williams. She was initially paid $100,000 for a film reshoot, while a male co-star in the same film received a whopping $1.5 million, which was 15 times her pay. The author also shares a personal experience where she was invited to review a report for a prominent international organization. Surprisingly, she discovered that the two male economists invited alongside her received double her compensation. The author received higher compensation only after the organization's chief economist learned about this unfairness. Ironically, the review she was involved in concerned the organization's gender discrimination issue. While these examples are prominent and memorable, the author argues that such biased and discriminatory individual behaviors aren't the main drivers of the overall gender income gap. So, what are the primary factors behind this gap? Is it due to differences in the education levels between men and women? The author explains that education gaps were a significant factor causing income disparities before the 1980s. However, after 2000, women's overall educational attainment became similar to men's. Even when comparing men and women with the same educational background, as you mentioned, female college graduates in the 4th and 5th groups still earn 27% less than their male counterparts. Another commonly discussed factor is occupational differences between men and women. Women are often found in professions like teaching, nursing, and accounting, which tend to have lower incomes than men-dominated fields such as management, civil engineering, and sales. This is another contributing factor to the overall income gap. However, the author's research takes us on a journey like reading a mystery novel. Many hypotheses are proposed and then systematically ruled out. The author reveals that these professions with biases and discrimination aren't the leading causes of the gender income gap. The author's critical discovery is that the income gap is dynamic. The income gap widens as they age for the same group of men and women. For example, in the 5th group, women who graduated from college around 1963 earned 90% of what men earned in their 20s. However, by their 30s, women's income dropped to 76% of men's. By their 40s, it fell further to 70%. This trend is consistent across all age groups in the 5th group. So, when does this income gap typically widen? As you may have guessed, it usually occurs after they have their first child, around 28 or 29. This is because women often choose to reduce their work hours after having children, either because of changes in job responsibilities or personal decisions to work in more flexible settings. However, it's not solely about working fewer hours. The author's statistical analysis shows that it's more about the nature of the work. The more experience and hours you accumulate in specific fields, the more valuable your time becomes. On the other hand, if you've worked less in the past, your future hours tend to be less valuable. This phenomenon is particularly prominent in fields like law, medicine, finance, and management, which are the highest earning but also most unequal. In these professions, more contact with clients, decision-making affecting others, emphasis on building and maintaining relationships, strict schedule adherence, and limited autonomy over task prioritization are the norm. This places mothers at a disadvantage because they often need help to respond at a moment's notice and may miss opportunities to engage in high-profile projects. This affects their experience accumulation, devaluing their future work hours compared to their male colleagues of the same age. This situation is not as prevalent in engineering, science, computer science, and mathematics, where the gender income gap is relatively minor. This is because these professions require less contact, prioritize independent work, and allow more control over schedules. The author categorizes jobs that demand long and unpredictable hours as greedy jobs, and these are the ones that contribute significantly to the widening of the gender income gap. From a family's perspective, having one partner in a greedy job and another in a more flexible position is often a rational choice, as it maximizes the overall family benefits. However, due to traditional societal expectations, women often end up in flexible roles. Therefore, the author suggests that the inequality within households leads to gender inequality in the labor market. These two aspects are like two sides of the same coin. While the author acknowledges that changing societal gender roles to make men assume more household responsibilities is challenging in most countries, he emphasizes the importance of tackling the issue at an industry level. The author believes reducing the greediness of jobs and making them more family-friendly is a highly feasible change. Now, let's take a look at an unusual industry, the pharmacy industry. Pharmacists are the professionals who work in pharmacies. This industry is unique because it has relatively high incomes and often involves customer interactions, yet the gender income gap is relatively small. Currently, the median income for female pharmacists is about 94% of that for male pharmacists. This gap has gradually narrowed over the past 50 years. This narrowing gap is linked to a crucial change that occurred in the last half-century. In the past, many medications required specialized compounding, making the relationship between pharmacists and customers more personal. Each pharmacist might have had their loyal customers whom they knew well, including their medical conditions and treatment progress. Pharmacists might even be called upon in the middle of the night to provide urgent prescriptions to their regular customers. This made the pharmacist's job somewhat akin to the greedy jobs in law and management, where longer hours led to higher returns. However, over the last few decades, standardized prescription drugs have become more prevalent, and patient information has been meticulously recorded in electronic health records. Pharmacists no longer need to establish personal connections with patients to provide suitable medications. They've become increasingly interchangeable with one another. This trend can be applied to other industries as well. When team members become more interchangeable, working hours for each individual can become more flexible, and the overall greediness of the work diminishes. From the example of the pharmacy industry, this shift doesn't necessarily lead to reduced salaries. In this context, the author's research discovered that a similar transformation occurs in other sectors such as healthcare, consulting, accounting, and finance. The changes are driven by advancements in information management and communication tools and a growing awareness among companies that younger employees, regardless of gender, are more likely to resign due to long working hours and lack of control over their schedules. Companies are consciously investing in enhancing the interchangeability of their employees. This might remind you of what many companies in your country are currently doing regarding internal knowledge management and experience preservation, as well as integrating historical chat records and data synchronization on various online office and communication platforms. These practices gradually boost the interchangeability of employees. Apart from strengthening team members' interchangeability and avoiding the expectation for everyone to be on call all the time, the book also discusses other viable ways to mitigate the workplace disadvantages faced by women. These include increasing the availability of high-quality childcare services to reduce the costs of young parents caring for their children and further developing technologies and organizational practices that make remote and flexible work more efficient. This way, both men and women can benefit from increased flexibility in their schedules.